We've got the foundation of an absolutely massive flooded castle and a mega ruined city. By the end of today, we're going to have 40 square feet of sinking stonework ready to cover in liters and liters of resin as we submerge this famous city from the Lord of the Rings beneath the waters of the Anduin. Welcome back to the biggest wargaming board in YouTube history. I've been building a huge wargaming layout for this famous Lord of the Rings location since I was 9 years old. The board has gone through many iterations, but today we are building a massive dockside castle sinking deep into the flooded city. But up first, let's hear from today's sponsor. The Warhammer Online universe is waiting for you and your alliance to conquer territory, dominate the war, and claim the throne. Become the ever-chosen in Warhammer Chaos and Conquest, the ultimate strategy and domination MMO mobile game, available in iOS, Android, and Windows. Download it today by clicking on the link in the description or by scanning my QR code. Build and train a powerful army by collecting warlords from more than 30 demons and warriors of chaos to increase your power, protect your fortress, and destroy your enemies. Participate in side quests, special events, and daily challenges. Conquer other chaos armies and slay your enemies as you campaign to bring chaos to the old world. Engage in realm battle and feel the taste of real-time strategy MMO experience. Climb the leaderboard and claim the Chaos Legion Master title to become the ever-chosen. Immerse yourself in the classic lore of Warhammer Fantasy battles and join this fantasy world by downloading the game on any of your mobile devices by clicking in the link in the top of the description or by scanning the QR code, and discover Warhammer Chaos and Conquest today. Last month we returned to my beloved Osgiliath, starting work on the second city block, and today we shall complete it, rounding out the first half of the first third of this mega Middle-earth scenery layout. For both the first and second city block, we've been reusing my old Osgiliath ruins, but today we'll finally be adding some new pieces as we take the first 40 square feet of flooded city to completion. Our first task is to finish the dock sinking into the river. We've already established the flooding riverside in our last build, but integrating this old bridge gatehouse into the landscape is going to create some great visual interest, as well as some really accessible landing spots for Orc Rafts making their amphibious assaults. I cut about 2 inches off the bottom of the structure to lower it to the ground level of the rest of the city, but soon realized I'd mismeasured and sliced off way too much, but decided to be inspired by my foolishness and carve a new foam XPS plinth to better integrate the old building into the cityscape. I grabbed a bunch of XPS foam, cut it down into strips, and mocked up the foundation, allowing it to terrace outwards a little, and then salvaged an old damaged stairwell to make an extra dock lowering down into the waters of the Anduin. Then, using a scalpel, ruler, pencil, and scrunched up alfoil, I imparted our usual stonework textures all around the outward facing sides of the foundation. I glued them down to the masonite baseboard with liquid nails, checking regularly that they would line up with the dock above, and then sealed the inside of the structure to make sure it was totally watertight, as the other massive advantage of this dock is it will drastically reduce the surface area of the water on this board, which will save a whole heap of epoxy resin when we get to doing our water effects. I glued the dock down on top, making sure it was sitting flush, and then it was time to finish some of the key tower details, namely the towers that have since been broken in the many times the old board had been played with in the last 10 years. These towers are carved from foam coreboard and held up by wooden dowel pillars, very old school techniques indeed, and I thought for about a second I should pin them, but I just could not be arsed with it, so I went to my new favorite method, 5-minute epoxy, to lock them down tight. On the southern tower, I put just a small ruined section and then decided to have the whole top, which was already partially collapsed, smashed off and landed down on the city floor below. The insides of the old gatehouse towers used to have removable side panels to access some horrible balsa wood ramps, so I did away with all of those and decided instead to have the little open side as docks by carving a series of stone plinths, stairs, and platforming. For the very lowest level, I carved some flagstones onto a block of foam and then sliced off the texture to make some very thin tiles which will end up submerged down at the base of the tower once the resin has flooded in. And that's going to be a really interesting set of dock structures. After making some trim to neaten the edges of those open faces and building the second dock around in the other tower, the whole dock surface is now finished, and it's really added so much interest to the board, both visually and from a gameplay perspective. Next up, we need to finish the other U-boat inspired dock inside the old cathedral. I made some more of the thin flagstones and placed them around the edges of the dock space so that they could be submerged, just like the last dock, really weathering them and placing a few at different angles as if they're listing or tipping as the whole structure sinks into the river. Then with some more liquid nails, I attached the cathedral and glued that down in place. I originally wanted to continue the stairwell that goes down from the bell tower to that lower dock level, but it didn't really work with how I'd spaced out the tiles, so I decided to cut a hole in the side and put on a little resin cast door, and now that massive bell tower is accessible from the side of the building, which is actually much better for gameplay anyway. Next, we smashed out a big live stream right here on the main channel as part of our Osgiliath themed streaming arc, and the viewers and I dove into my box of old salvaged rubble from the old build and glued down a heap of pieces all over the board, beginning to build up that rubble profile. These pieces are all part of the old previous board, so they match the stonework of the buildings we've used, and this is the perfect first stage to really build that ruined, war-torn, urban city fight aesthetic. We'll add more rubble very soon, but these pieces help immensely to blend the buildings with the landscape. I then took all the boards outside and did one final pass of weathering, carving and chipping away many of the sections of the older buildings which were just way too intact, and then I grabbed some grout and some PVA and filled in and sealed many of the fine gaps, particularly between the foam edging of the buildings and the modeling compound flagstone texture that we made in the last episode. This is a really essential process, as it just makes the whole board look a lot more seamless by adding realistic grit size of fine dirt into all those joints, and as the grout is also an adhesive, it strengthens a lot of those joints as well. It's a simple process: a seam of high bond PVA from Geek Gaming, a heavy sprinkle of grout, brush it all into the grooves, and then I sealed the grout and the entire modeling compound stonework with a spray of isopropyl alcohol and then Geek Gaming Matte Scenic Sealant. This step is really key to make sure all the exposed modeling compound texture survives the rigors of gaming, and it activates the adhesive properties of the grout. With the first board done, I jumped onto the second one, and one awesome find in the box of rubble during the live stream was a few test pieces of modeling compound rolled flagstone. So I broke these up and smooshed them all around the sinking riverbank, which really added so much visual detail to this big rubble pile, and then repeated the grouting and sealing process for this second board. After slapping down the two fully rubble boards together, I decided there was too much open space in the courtyard directly in front of that big bell tower, so I glued down another relic from the channel's past, the original foam carved master of my old Armon Hen centerpiece. It's so fun to put all these little Easter eggs throughout the build. I really enjoy it. And with these two boards ready for paint, I'm absolutely loving the way they're coming together. But as I'm sure many of you have noticed, there is a big old empty patch in the northwest corner, which is going to need something special to bring it to life. So this is the last big piece for this board, the massive old weapons factory from the original Osgiliath board, and this guy is way too intact. We need to smash this apart, we need to ruin it. It looks like it's come straight out of Minas Tirith, not out of Osgiliath. And also, there's a big old hole in the top of it. We need to create some sort of upper level structure. There's these amazing stairwells which I built all those years ago, which used to go to a kind of building that went on the top here, which is actually in the first section. We've already used that part, and that's why it's not here. So we want to build something to make the stairs go to something, because they're really cool and I think they're going to be great for gameplay. So let's add some walls, let's add some sort of flooring, some sort of structure, and smash this up so that it suits Osgiliath.
I am Mr. LaFrankton. Welcome to my YouTube channel.
If you're enjoying the build so far, let me know down in the comments your favorite scene from The Lord of the Rings, especially if you think it would make a cool Middle-earth mini diorama, and then like the video and subscribe to go in the draw to win one of the amazing new Middle-earth battle forces. We've given away 2 already, but there are still 2 up for grabs, and this time you can double your chances if you join our Patreon down in the description or become a YouTube channel member. We'll be announcing the 2 final winners in the next Osgiliath video, so get those comments in now and smash that join button below to get amongst some baller Middle-earth models. Also remember to use my affiliate links down below whenever you're purchasing any hobby goodies, from Middle-earth to the Horus Heresy and everything in between. We've got affiliates in the US, EU, Australia, New Zealand and Canada, and any purchase made through the links gets you fantastic prices and send some dollary dues back to support the channel. Thanks guys. So this weapons factory is another huge relic of ages past. It is the final building that was ever finished for the original board and actually featured in the very first video on this channel. And although some of the carving work is of a much higher standard than the other stuff, it's still pretty rough. Hopefully we can really elevate it with a nice makeover and create an absolutely banger centerpiece to cap off this first finished half of the board. I grabbed a whole bunch of XPS foam sheeting and trimmed it down to 1/2 inch thick and started dreaming up ideas for the upper story, and surprise surprise, they quickly got out of hand. So much for a simple ruined topper. I decided to start making the floor, trimming it down to fit the nice support lip I already had from the last upper story, and I then cut an archway for the door to the external stairwell and mocked up ideas of where the first floor was heading. I then hacked out a collapsed floor outline so gamers could still get their hands in to access the bottom level, and then used a flagstone roller to give the floor some nice texture, just pressing really hardly into the foam to get that to read. It doesn't work as well as when you go into the modeling compound, but in a small section that's going to be covered with rubble, it's just a nice little bit of detail. I spruced up that detail factor with my scrunched up alfoil, and then really honed in on the ruined edging with some cracks snaking across the tiles, and then glued that floor in place, and I'm really happy with how that's looking. To mount the upper walls to the flooring, I carved a lip for a strong structural bond, and then set about carving our usual stonework pattern into the sheeting. However, this time I decided to use a bunch of bricks of different sizes to give the panel a bit more detail, as well as some accents around the archway leading to the stairs. I continued the pattern around the corners to make sure the bricks were aligned from piece to piece, and I then glued down those first 3 finished pieces and went back to the drawing board to repeat the process all over again and start planning the next floor above. And as you can see, this very small keep is quickly becoming the remains of a towering bastion. Why can't I just ever make anything small and simple? So we've hit a bit of a milestone here. I'm finally happy after many attempts and kind of trying all sorts of different sort of profiles and outlines with the silhouette, the overall structure of the upper section of this former weapons factory. But before I go diving into carving all of these different panels, we need to work out how this piece is actually going to play. And at the moment, we've got some big old stairs that sort of just go to nowhere, and no one's really going to go up them. And the whole point of this rebuild is to motivate people to use these epic stairs. So we need to put in some sort of extra upper platform, some stairs, and then we can work out where all of the windows will go, because there need to be some upper gantry windows for archers. And then once those windows have a placement and a stairwell coordination, it's time to slice up the rest of the stonework. So a stairwell was in order, which took me a couple of goes, but we eventually got something working up the straight section to move from the first to the second level, but I then needed to spiral the stairs around to reach the center of the front, which I did, creating little angled small stone steps that I placed individually. And now we've got the height of the second level established, we can carve in our windows and then the remaining stonework. I decided to mimic the lower level of the base piece with a large central archway, this time partially collapsed, and then a smaller archway on the small panel that sits on an angle, and then we have smaller archways again on the top floor for our elevated firing positions. I glued down the angled panel once that was carved, which helped secure the stairwell in place, and then moved on to finishing the front archway. The lower archway was super tall, which looks fantastic and also helps keep access to the lower level, but for the upper platform, I knew the ruined profile would be tapering away, so another large arch wasn't going to work here. So I carved up the upper floor platform for our second floor and glued that in place to see how much window real estate I'd need to carve, and then I decided on several tall and thin archways was the way to go, using a 25mm base as my template and opting for 3 arches. I carved them with a bunch of rich details and then glued them in place, and then finished off the front panel with a little ruined taper, which sort of built up a profile of rubble for this silhouette of the building. And I continued that down and made it all jagged over the top of the angled panel, and followed that stonework up and across the next piece, trimming it down and then detailing the edge of the broken pieces before moving on to the final set of stone panels. Instead of continuing the upper level we've started all the way around, I sloped down from the front and then made a raised corner at the back with a few more windows, but the other corner I left at the top of the first level, and then decided to carve that away even lower, which helped create an awesome ruined outline, as if some catapult shot has blasted through the top of the building and the walls have collapsed around the entry and exit wounds, firing diagonally across the structure. To take this further, and also to help blend the old foam and the new, I sort of hacked away and full on ripped out a chunk of the lower section of the original building along that same firing axis, and that really blended those and made the top structure feel a little less just plonked on top. This process also left me with some nice chunks of rubble, which I weathered down and then glued to the inside of the lower level for the beginnings of a nice rubble profile. I then grabbed my scalpel and weathered the old building itself, hacking away little chips here and there, and then smashing the old stairs to make them look worn and damaged. And then the final detail was to add a few small pieces of stripping to further accent that kind of back boring flat section of the new building, which also helped hide some of the joins. And I then threw the building down outside onto the city, and we can see the full build journey in all its glory, and I'm reasonably happy. But now we get to make it really sing with a big old sexy prime with rattle cans. Up first is the Rust-Oleum Dark Grey Primer, just all over everything, complete coverage here. This bad boy can even be directly used on the orange polystyrene if you're careful and you don't spray it too closely and let the propellant evaporate before it hits the foam. It still does eat foam if you're not careful, but the orange foam is actually pretty resilient. Then I come in with Aged Grey, a nice lighter tone, and hit the whole city with a top-down zenithal to hit all of the raised details and leave the dark grey in the recesses. Instant detail without a single dry brush. Sometimes you can break the top-down rule when it's better for accenting details like the floor textures, for instance. I always get the cans parallel to the surface to just kiss the top of that texture, and you can do that in and around the ruins as well. Just make sure you're getting a really nice detail-centric finish. With the prime complete, I just want to shout out my amazing Patreons. These incredible people are a huge part of why any of this madness can happen. It's been really fun sharing all of the work in progress photos of this project with them on our Discord, and even doing a bunch of Osgiliath themed giveaways for the Patreons. A huge congratulations to Elaine Emenega and Anne Benary, who took home the 2 massive battle forces in our 2 Osgiliath livestream giveaways, as well as Robert Manson, who scored the first Orc captain in the Patreon Battle Games and Middle-earth campaign over on the second channel. To become a part of the family and support the channel and go in the draw to win some sweet giveaways, check out my Patreon in the description, or simply hit the join button here on YouTube, just down there under the video next to the subscribe button. Before continuing the paint job, I drove to the storage unit and grabbed the first part of the city so I could make sure that our scheme was matching, and then I had a nice good look at the first board. Our next task is to finish the stonework, and this is once again just a super basic and simple scheme, an all over black oil wash and then a brown oil wash into the recesses and specific areas to build up grime. This paint job is just so damn simple. 2 sprays, 2 washes, finished. And with the speed at which I need to achieve stuff, it's amazing. Yes, I could do some more accent work with dry brushes and some airbrushed glazes, and one day when all of these pieces are going to go on display, I might do like a full level up, but for now, they look perfectly suitable. The brown wash is a little thinner, you kind of glaze on that grime. Sometimes you need a couple of coats, but usually one will do, but the black wash is darker and more of a splotchy stain to add both recessed detail and large discolorated sections of weathered stone. The great thing with the oils is if you go too hard with one of the stains, you can just blend it back with thinner until you're happy. I love painting like this. It's so freeing to work in such broad strokes, especially after the mental detail of the carving. The final color to go down is some Vallejo Air Blue Grey through my awesome little airbrush sent to me by Scale Modeling Supplies here in Australia. I had an absolute dream applying this color to all our roofing and to our water. I sprayed for over an hour without a single clog. I'm clearly getting better at maintaining my airbrush. The water had a gradient put down first with rattle cans just moving from black up to that light grey to create sort of a luminance value, and then the blue is applied over the top as a filter, which creates a graduated tone to hint at the depth of the water. There's lots of work to do here later on once we get to the resin pour, but that's good for now. If you want more info on that process, check out the first video from the first board, which is linked up above, and the links for the SMS airbrushes and all that gear are down in the description. Man, this city is getting me really excited. I've got so many little blue roofs all in one place, and that slate color really pops against the grey monotony of the ruins. Then the final stage, which will turn this board into a god tier ruin of Stalingrad proportions, is rubble. I've shown this process process many times before, but we've got an interesting little challenge this time around. First up, I grabbed my blend of City Rubble and Grimdark City Rubble from the Geek Gaming Scenics range, and then smashed down a whole bunch of the fast-drying basing glue. Let that dry for about 15 minutes, and then just pile all the rubble on. Large sizes first, and then your smaller aggregate. Remember that the full Geek Gaming Scenics range is available from my own shop, Zorpazorp.com, link down in the description. So check that out if you want to support the channel and get some amazing quality scenics at the same time. I moved through the whole city just piling this stuff absolutely everywhere, but over at the waterside, we've got heaps of exposed foam, which needs to be pure rubble, because I actually ran out of modeling compounds. So I slathered on a whole bunch of glue and spread it out with a paintbrush, and then carefully applied an even blend of aggregate, ensuring the whole surface had a really good bond. We don't want any of that gross greeny foam coming through. For the exposed foam that was almost vertical, I waited until the glue was really grabby and tacky before sprinkling down the rubble, and then it just stuck straight to it. Looked fantastic. Then I waited overnight, tipped off all of the excess rubble and gathered it back up into my tub, and then got stuck into the final pass of sealing the board, which is the same process as the grout. Hit it with ISO and then utterly soak the whole board in Geek Gaming Matte Scenic Sealant. I did this about 3 or 4 times over a 24-hour period, letting it dry and then hitting it again and again to make sure it was all locked down hard. Then once it's all dry, we get to enjoy the truly satisfying moment of whacking the full board together with both city blocks and then having a bit of a play with the modular layout. We can now see how the different city sections can be swapped around for a bunch of different setups, and we can even have a look at the first iteration of the opposing riverbanks, and that's only going to get bigger and cooler as this board gets larger. We of course need to now pour an absolute heap of resin on the board to make it truly flooded, but that mental experience is going to need a whole video all to itself. That is coming real soon. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and remember to download Warhammer Chaos and Conquest using my link in the description or my QR code to immerse yourself in the classic lore of Warhammer fantasy battles in the ultimate Warhammer MMO mobile game.